we will call this Monday, October 2nd, 2017, work session meeting of the Somerset School Board to order at 6 p.m. Tasia, can you please do roll call?
Brian Moulton, Katie Thurman, Marie Colbeth.
Here.
Nancy Dressel.
Here.
Courtney Kirkowski. Bob Gunther.
Here.
Patty Schefter.
Here.
Thank you. Board members, there's a link to our protocols on your agenda. If you'd like to take a minute to review those. Item 2, our district mission is together we will engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions to pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Our next item is public comment. We have not received any cards for public comment yet this evening. Is there anyone in the room wishing to make a public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to item 4. Our topic for action is to suspend Robert's Rules of Order. Is anyone willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Patty. Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of suspending Robert's Rules of Order, please say aye. Aye. All those against? Motion passes unanimously 4-0. So the first item on our agenda is the 2017-18 budget. So I'll turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, Nancy. So, I asked Tasia to attach the budget hearing packet. When Mark brought this up, he said initially the board wants to review the budget hearing information. But then we talked a little bit, and he said actually the board is becoming much more aware of the fact that they oversee the superintendent and they oversee the approval of the budget. And so you possibly want to consider different ways to discuss and look at the budget throughout the year. And so obviously we can't go back in time and change what we've done throughout this process, but going forward, if you look at the calendar on page 4 of the budget hearing, you can see we're in October. I would think in the December to January 2018, January 2018, January through May of 2018, those 3 subheadings we could add in periodically discussions within departments where, for instance, Trish would come and talk about the CIA budget. This is where the funds go. This year, that department in particular changes a lot. The funds don't change, but what they're expended on every year changes. Could be some discussion of what is happening this year for your information, but also then what the plan is for the next year or the next couple of years, depending on the situation and what's known. Some other departments could be IT, B&G, each buildings could discuss a little bit, athletics activities, people services. So we have an opportunity to kind of just give you a glimpse of some of the things that the people responsible for the budget allocations think about and what they're planning and what we talk about. And obviously, now that we have the strategic plan, that will come into play as well a lot for what we're thinking about going forward. Obviously we have limited funds that we have discretion over how they're spent in a given year. We're mid-70s in personnel costs as a percentage of our expenditures. It's lower than other districts because we outsource custodial and transportation and food service. Usually it's a bit higher than that, but still, those funds are still going to have to be paid to Clean Mark and Safeway and so forth. So there's not a lot of discretion in the remaining funds. And so that's where these department discussions will come into play. Because, for instance, the 17-18 budget is kind of a status quo budget. There's not a lot changing. It's year over year. We have a wage increase. We're looking at some general enrollment expenditures versus revenues. But that being said, I'm hearing from Mark what you're saying to Mark and what you want, what you need to be able to speak legibly when people ask you questions. And I know we've talked in the past. I know, when you and I look at this, and you see every month the code and information and examples. we see different things. And so, you know, I look at this and I say, well, here, it's all like, oh, everything's right here. This is clear what the budget is for. And you look at this and you say, I mean, I don't know, what is all this? What does it mean? And I get that, you know, so I think having the department heads or people from the area of the allocation here to just talk about some of this stuff, and not explain every single dollar, every single cent, but some of the things they're thinking about, hopefully that can be useful to you and that will meet the need that you're looking for. So, all that being said, going forward, the next meeting, to finalize, we did have the third Friday count. It was submitted on Friday. We are down a bit in pupil count. And as we've talked, possibly remember this revenue limit formula is odd. This should give us a little more revenue for this year. We have some open enrollment finalizations to do. That is to say, the number of kids in and out, specifically regular versus special ed count. That'll adjust slightly. I did an initial walkthrough, not very much, slightly what I estimated in the budget for those open enrollment revenues and open enrollment expenditures. And then finalize for where we're at for all current staffing and benefit elections. Some of those were placeholder in the numbers that we used for the budget hearing. So not a lot of change will occur between the budget hearing and the 23rd when we approve the original budget. Those are the things that will affect the budget. So questions or thoughts?
I do appreciate you giving us that outline every time. From the data workshop that Nancy and I both attended on Friday, they did give us some good suggestions as to reports that we've been seeing, but really haven't been using as a benchmark tool to see on a regular basis. And one of them would include finding 10 cohorts that we want to, that we're not better than now, but that we want to aim towards, and continue to look at their numbers. And one of the ways was with the budget.
Other districts, you see?
Yes, both locally, in the state, and then also nationally. It really sounds like a good idea, but like Shannon, you always had the chart where we can always look back and see, okay, where are we at with this? And it's hard to know what we can do with that information. So we've oftentimes had the data, but not kept it as necessarily as a benchmark, and this is what we do with it. So helping us make that correlation, I think, would be very beneficial as board members to see, okay, how is this helping us achieve our goal of educating our students? We see the data, but helping us make the connection so that we can gauge the improvements, or where we maybe need to put our attention, or the dollars. And that's where the budget portion would tie in, I would say. We always had the availability of that Apple book. I don't know what it is. It's not called the Apple book, but it's got an apple on the front of it every year. That, to me, is a very beneficial tool. And I don't know that the rest of you have been getting it. I've had to request it each time.
It's the expensive taxpayers' money.
It has a wealth of information in it, if you like numbers. If you don't, it's a waste of time and a waste of dollars for us to get it for you. But that's one where maybe we can pull. But both of the presenters shared with us some websites and some links, and so I've asked for the electronic copies to help us put together. And they said, don't tell them 1 week before, give them months, 6 weeks to present it. And in return, we would hope to get that information a week ahead of reviewing it. And we aren't asking for anything more than a 15-minute presentation, similar to what you're doing this evening. But to respect the fact that when we ask for it, we really have to have a reason why we're asking for it. So with that budgeting, just to help us gauge, okay, where are we at, and are we getting the results from where those dollars are? If we can get towards that, this outline is a great tool to start with or to use, but helping us make that correlation, I think, would be very beneficial. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I like the cohort idea. I do have quite a lot of data on the website. I haven't updated it for the most recent. In fact, I haven't checked to see if it's out yet. I had the most recent information on, which was 1560 for cohort data, and that was both cost and revenue side and people count side. But at the same time, I never, pulled it up other than maybe once to say, hey, look, here's the website. So, I can always bring that up as part of the discussion. factors in what we do.
So you have the data there, help us make that connection, that's what I would ask Robin.
Well, and I would add to it that I think having some departments come forward and present their budget and how they think about it. You know, part of the data and accountability is empowering board members to be advocates within the community. And so, you know, I mean, the descriptions of the budget codes don't mean much to us because we don't work in it every day. Whereas someone presenting to us about their budget and how they make decisions and what their biggest purchases have been lately and how that aligns with the strategic plan and you know, what impacts they're seeing in classrooms would empower us to, you know, feel comfortable that we're measuring how our dollars are being spent, and also to be able to be advocates within the community for how the taxpayer dollars are being used. So I think that's a great idea to look at that calendar and where we can have in some department budget reports. And I think if we can add into the reports that we get comparisons to benchmark districts, that will also help us. I think one thing that the gentleman said, and we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves on the agenda, but he talked about how you have competent employees who are using this data to make decisions every single day and just aren't sure how to communicate it with the board. And when you bridge that gap and have it regularly communicated with the board and then are regularly communicating with the community, and he said the ultimate benefit of that is then when it's maybe time to go to referendum, your community is so informed of what you're doing in your district and how your budget is that they're suggesting it's time to go to referendum. So, I mean, I think these are things that you guys do every single day in your job, and it's just bridging that gap of communicating with us so we can be empowered advocates. So thank you, I think that's a great idea. Is there any feedback to the board of what department you might like to hear from first?
There's so many. Like, I guess I would first like to see just a breakdown of what is considered a department. You know, that would be interesting.
Well, yeah, again, notice I included school buildings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's-
So, you know, and is a department, you know, as I look and see the principals, so is Shannon, Chris, and Sarah Abby's supervisor? Is she her own supervisor? Does she have budget that goes into all three buildings? You know, it's,
These things, there's a lot of interwoven dollars.
yeah,
One in particular would be buildings and grounds, George, district-wide perspective. And then at the same time, within each building, that building's needs, he will work with that principal in that building to determine is this something that's a high priority this year or this budget cycle. While at the same time, he also looks at the bigger picture of the district as a whole.
I mean, a lot of it, I mean, I just look at when I fill out my budget for my department, I know what I do, but at the end, and a lot of it's just communication between me and the administrator. But at the end of the process, when he approves it, then I fill out a one-page kind of synopsis that has some basic questions on it. What is, you know, our goal, our mission, what are our top 5 things that we spend on, what do we spend on professional development, and then where can we make cuts? And every year we have to make a 5% cut, and where is it? And through, you know, and we have our actuals, our budget and actuals 5 years past. So even though our budget stays the same, because we're constantly moving, we can reallocate and then show a trend that we are being fiscally responsible, yet responsive to the people that we serve. And it's, you know, and it's, by the time you get that one-page document done, your presentation is right there.
Yeah.
It's pretty, it's an informative document, and it's easy for the board to then buy into what you're doing.
That does sound really good for someone who would be the same way across the board then too.
And when you get boards and this, I see
Mhm.
exactly what you're talking. In all department, so there, obviously there's different ways to look at department, right? There's the English department, there's the
Mhm.
playground.
Right.
So each of these departments that I listed off essentially receive on a weekly basis a Skyward expenditure, budget to actual report. And I think I updated everything so they all, over the years, they all do have the prior year as well, but possibly additional prior years would be helpful. It's just at some point, you turn from the portrait to a landscape, you get all the data, and then you're getting rid of other things you want to keep on your encumbrances or whatever by the additional years, but that's something that we can talk about as well.
Dave, do you think it would be reasonable in November to have you kind of give an overview of the budget? Process is the wrong word, but who, the departments, the overall arching departments.
Kind of set a calendar for this kind of thing, maybe?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I've already added it to the list of agenda items for November. So we'll look forward to kind of just an overview.
We'll talk about it at admin and
Yeah, of the departments, and then maybe a proposed schedule for which departments it would be appropriate and feasible to have them present in those months.
Okay.
Wonderful. Any other feedback for Dave? Or questions? Thank you very much. So the next thing on the agenda is understanding the DPI district and school report cards. So now to Trish.
That's me. Okay, the time has come. All the data was released, it's all out there for the public. You can search it in WISE-Public. Any community member could search it in WISE-Public. It's a pretty easy tool to use. I was informed that you would like to have an overview of our report card. The report cards were supposed to be released on the 28th, I believe. That has been postponed. So we don't know when they are coming out. They're saying sooner than later, and they won't even give us a time period. We do have access, of course, to our data, and we've been using our data for months now to just kind of pull it apart, think about it, look at root causes, set some goals in action, talk with our building leadership teams. And right now we're using it, again, as kind of looking at a starting spot for program evaluation and setting our SLOs through EE. By the way, we had an Illuminate training today, and people were very excited. It's the second time they've really touched it, so it makes a lot more sense now. And just as you were talking about, it's about not having observable data, but putting action with the data. So when we look at that data, we're not just saying, yay or nay, or what the heck, but we're saying, now what? So what should we do? Before I show you this data, I just want to put out a disclaimer that the Middle Border Conference peeps, we meet all the time. We are a very tight, cohesive group. We have the same goals, and that's high achievement, high growth for our kids. And we use each other as a network for professional growth, for strategizing, for problem solving. And we really have made the pact that we really would like to see the Middle Border and CISA 11 be the one in Wisconsin that everybody's talking about. So it pains me a little bit to show you comparative data, although I know that's something that we're all chomping at the bit to see. How did we do, knowing where we fell last year? So when I show that to you, I do want to make the disclaimer that someone's always at the top and someone's always at the bottom. And there's a whole set of variables that go along with that. We had a whole set of action that went along with ours last year. Every building kind of putting some things in place, different groups of people putting a whole lot in place, and really trying to do the best we can. So just to show you, we'll see some comparative data as well as our own results. You do have access to this now. It was shared with you and connected to the calendar. Sorry for the late notice. We had kind of short notice on wanting to get this on the calendar, but it is all here for you and you can take a look. The graphs just reflect what the chart says. So the fact you can't see that over there right now, you can scroll over on your computer, I can scroll over, but I've got some other interesting data to show you. At a district level, when we take all the scores and we put them together and they crunch them up, district-wide, we just get that big overview picture of where we fell. ELA and Proficient Advanced for our district, math for Proficient Advanced. Yay? Yes? Okay, seeing some nice improvement there. If you scroll down, you're going to see where we fell with science and where the state is. So you always see that state comparison, and then for social studies compared to the state. So that's as a district. That's a very big shot. That's taking into account the Forward Exam, Aspire, well, not really Aspire, but ACT. Aspire does feed into that, but it's really not in the calculations. At our high school level, We have our ACT scores this year. Excited to say that our composite was up from 19.7 to 21.1. Going to stop it there. The state remained the same. That's also really exciting news. It's something we really celebrated. A lot of work went into this, a lot of helping our kids get their heads in the game and keeping them motivated to do the best they can. And we really believe, and this is something I really want to state, we test every student possible. I mean, there's no back door. And that is something that varies from district to district, and it's something we'll see a big change next year. And that goes back to that comparison thing, because this year, there is a 95% rate you have to hit for assessment. We test everybody, unless those couple little kids that take the DLM or someone who walks out and we have to invalidate a test. We've had those, parent opt out, we have those occasionally. But our philosophy is, let's use this, let's get everyone in front of this, let's see what we can do, and let's open some doors for kids and get some data for our students. That 95% has now been removed for next year, so I'm not sure what that will do when we start looking at comparative data. I'm going to go back so you can just kind of see where we are here. Our trend scores in the last 3 years, 21 here, state remained about the same. Nice trend. We increased in math by 0.3. We'll take that, and we're going strong. They're using some good data now to make some changes, reviewing their essential standards, and really putting some hard work behind helping our kids really be high math achievers. Little below state here. That's the only place where we fell a little below state. I mean, but lots and lots of good work going on here. That PLC is really rocking. Reading, up 2.0. That's a big yay, right? And again, we already had our PLCs sitting down today, pulling out more data, connecting it to the strands, trying to see where is that weak spot. Where's our next spot to really put some energy and to get some kids excited about learning and engaged in their process. Math, check that out. Up 1.3%. Or science, science up 1.3, well above state average, and then our composite that I showed you. If we look at the middle border, let's see if I can do this with my, yep, yeah, I did it. If you look at the middle border, here's state at that 20, and here's where we fall. Social studies and science also at the high school have some nice data that they can use to help evaluate programming, look at their essential standards, and look at student data connected to it. Great news. Great year.
Fantastic.
We're excited. Lots of celebration. Really rewarding a lot of the hard work that went into that. Now, last year our middle school had a little bit of a hiccup in their giddy up. This year, lots of action went into that. More action this year, so we're even more excited to see what's going to happen now. I should almost, did you guys want to talk? Did you want to talk?
Yes, I do.
I knew she would. Shannon, did you want to say anything about
You got it. No.
Okay, go
I
for
do
it.
want to talk because I'm really proud of us.
Yes.
And I want to show the other graphs too. So I'm just I'll start here first. So last year, so we went from down here to up here ranking wise with some massive growth where we had 44% of our kiddos proficient, is this ELA on top, up to
Yeah.
60, over 60% proficient in advanced. Same deal with math. We went from second to the bottom. So we were floating down here at 40, and we're up over 50 this year. It did it, yay. So in ELA, this is just a comparison. I put this one together to look at the growth for how we compared growth-wise to other districts. So this is us right here. This is last year, this is 16, 17. So some massive growth we're seeing. I know that we've had a district contact Trish already asking what did we do. So that was ELA, very similar in math. We had more growth than anybody else in math. We were here and moved up to there. Still shooting because I'd like to beat and get up to where Osceola's at up there and continue. And I think the work that we're putting into more time on task with math, the way we're going to work reteaching this year is going to have some real positive impacts for our kids. Science and social studies. 64.7% of our kids proficient and advanced in science, and then 62.1 in social studies. This is an area where when you compare us to others, we're floating toward the bottom half. So that's a conversation that both of our science and our social studies PLCs can have this year as far as, now that we're a couple years into the raised cut scores, what can we do next? Because we know math and ELA went through that in 2012-13, and now this was year 2 of science and social studies cut scores being raised. So this provides then more conversation. We have a new science resource that the science crew is over the moon about, working really well so far. So they're excited about that, but this will provide some more conversation for them. So I was very happy. I can't wait to see our report card because I think our growth score is going to look pretty outstanding. And I know Trish will get down, you're gonna do the cohort thing too, right?
Yep.
Because that's awesome. So, any questions?
Nice bike.
Nice bike, nice bike. We are excited about these results. The middle school put their heads together after last year and said, what is going on? And the nice thing to know about the middle school, the high school is it's different when you look at that data because they really have one group, ACT, those 11th graders. And that is their point of reference. That is their, and the variables connected with one cohort. You can't do that comparison. It's not really reflected in the high school data. It's how did this group do? We can do some tracking with Aspire, but it's not involved in our state report card. The middle school is different. You know, they have that same group of kids. They drop off one, they add one, but they have a pretty stable group that they are working with and tracking growth and achievement. So exciting stuff, and this year with adding in additional math time to really go after what was going on here, looking at root cause, we know that some of the other schools that did that exact thing, giving their kids more time with that content. So we're hoping to see some continued growth and celebrate that. At our elementary level, it's grades 3 and
Can I ask you a
4.
middle school question?
Middle school questions.
Sorry. Did the performance series scores at the end of the year predict this achievement?
I would say no, and not overall. We have found some correlation between the two, but it hasn't been a real, we'll have kids, I know I've seen on more than one occasion where we have a kid on performance series sometimes score much lower than what they've scored on the forward exam. So I would say I haven't seen a really high correlation. When we look at, by the time, I hate to say we get to the performance series at the end of the year, they're quite burned out on testing. But at the same time, some kids will knock out the performance series and not do as well on the forward. So I haven't seen, just in trying, because we do try to see, can you draw the parallel? I haven't seen a huge high correlation with that.
Have you seen any parallel between the fall scores and the?
I guess I haven't looked at as closely at that, only because I try to look at,
Well,
what
it's
are
a
we
lot of
seeing.
time and money invested in that.
Yep.
And
Not anymore.
Well, yeah, we've made a change, so I'll be interested to see how FAST works with that, so.
We've also looked at Aspire and trying to correlate those scores because they give a predictive ACT. So we look at predicted 9 to predicted 10 to ACT, and we're really doing some data diving with that. And then why offer on for certain kids. It's interesting, looking at motivation, engagement, looking at those other factors that would be that one point in time test and what was their score connected to that. We're excited with FAST because it gives us one platform. We can start looking at kids way back in JK and K, in that early literacy and early math, and then go all the way up the line, have one platform where we can really do some nice data diving. Okay, elementary, grades 3 and 4. Did I go? No. Go. No. How about this? Okay, so grades 3 and 4. Here we are, ELA, state is here, we are here. We took a little bit of a rollback at our elementary in one grade level, and that impacts, and I'll show you the cohort group. Many of the elementaries in the area, when you compare them here, are grades 3, 4, 5. We are are we the only elementary that's just grade 3, 4?
No,
Who's the other one? Baldwin used to be, but they switched that.
there's one other one, I think, but not many.
The other elementaries really are 3 grades. We're 2 grades that impacts the data, either in the good or the bad, depending on our cohort groups. But we look at the cohort groups to see how they're performing. When you look against here, you'll see overall the elementary is here. We had high scoring 4th grade, we had lower scoring 3rd grade, and then that's where it popped out. Math, moving on up. Again, at this level, 4th grade also is part of that 4-8 group, and then 10 and 11 that take science or social studies. So you'll see where science came out for 4th grade and where social studies came out for 4th grade in respect to the state scores.
Can I jump in? Vanna, can you go back and
Then,
I'd pick you over here. So to kind of break this down, as Trish kind of said, you'll see that next. It's, you know, one group of kids really, and actually, can I?
Yeah.
If you go ahead, we actually saw some pretty good growth going from last year's 3rd grade to this year's 4th grade. So happy to see that some things are still working there. And really, if you broke this down, our score, can you go back, Trish, to the elementary? It's really not ELA as a whole that we struggled with in 3rd grade, it was writing. So they break it into 6 parts: reading, listening, 3 different kinds of writing. That's the area where we really struggled. And so I've been meeting, you know, with 3rd grade. Today we were sitting down looking through and kind of parsing through what can we do differently. Last year we started a new reading curriculum, Journeys. This year we're starting the writing portion of that. It's a big thing to start a whole new curriculum, and so we said let's bring the writing on next year, and I think that will really make a big difference. So if you kind of went grade by grade, that would explain it a little bit more. Writing in 4th grade was the lowest of their scores, but all still were well above that at state average. We were kind of right by state average. We were just above in 2 areas of writing and just behind in the other. Reading, and listening, we were all still ahead. So I think we'll still see some good growth this year, some things that we're going to change and adjust. I'm really proud of the math and the continued good progress we're making there. So any questions in the elementary?
It looks like things are above the state average, and it's really good.
I did throw in a couple other quick things. If you look at the one that you have, you're going to see some nice colors. They're not really showing up with the brightness here. What we did was, you know, this is only the 2nd year for the forward exam. And we have forward DLM. So if you see any other data out there that the numbers are off by point this or point that, it's because we looked at the whole package. Our kids who took the forward, and the DLM is that alternative assessment, that we have a very small percentage of kids who take it based on essential elements. And we put them all together as far as proficient and advanced. So this is last year's scores. Here's this year's scores for the same grade level. If you look at the one you were sent, or if you really have really good, you know, go diagonal, and you'll see the amazing growth from a cohort group. So 3rd graders did 51.5, it grew to 58.7. 4th grade, 48.1 in ELA. After 5th grade, 63% proficient advanced. That's amazing. Big celebrations here. Check this one out. 31.6 at the end of 5th grade ELA. End of 6th grade ELA, 57.4% proficient advanced. Great things going on here to help our kids really grow and hit some nice achievement. You can continue this pattern, 50.1 to 61, 55 to 59, and so on. That's exciting. That shows that the work we're doing is really making an impact for our kids. Math, same kind of good stuff going on here. If you go 3rd grade to 3rd grade, 4th grade to 4th grade, that's one way to look at it. Different sets of variables that we have to deal with and respond to. And no excuses, straight commitment. Go this way, you're going to see those same kids growing over time. It's fabulous data, and it's something to really be excited about for our kids and for our community. Science and social are here too. You don't have a cohort group for that because they're tested in 4 years. We don't have the same assessment. Maybe go back 4 years and who knows what we were testing then. Actually, I know, but social studies, same thing. So we have some really exciting things to look at. When we get to the state report card, when it should arrive, I just want to remind you, and I attached it so you can see, this is the district one from last year. So remember, the district gets one whole report card, then each building gets theirs, those all go together. This was overall score last year. We were just below the exceeds expectations. We want to move up, I'm sure, hoping it happens. Remember that there were 4 priority areas. I know hope is not a strategy. Who just thought that in their head? I know it. I knew it. I know it's going to go up. Remember that there's student achievement scores. The one thing to know here is they're largely based across the board, but we've got 3rd grade reading is a big deal. A lot of research about kids being able to read at a 3rd grade level, setting them up for success or a path for intervention. So we're going to have to really work on that and look at those scores. 8th grade math is the other one that is a benchmark for our district and for those buildings. So we'll see those configured in here. We get achievement scores, we get growth scores. Regardless of where your kids start, where did they end? Closing the gap, remember this is the place where we look at graduation rate, we look at that math, and we look at that ELA, both in 3rd grade and 8th grade. The last focus area is graduation rate. They also take into account our attendance, because we know that's important, kids have to be here to learn. There's our 3rd grade, 8th grade pieces. If you scroll down, this is kind of fun. May remember this graph? Remember that one? Yeah. So this is the one where state remained just about the same now for 16, 17, but Somerset did not. So it'll be fun to see a different shape graph there, because we'll be up there. So good stuff, great stuff to celebrate. On the right track, we want to keep the momentum. This year, or last year, we spent a lot of time really identifying essential standards, aligning our assessments to them, working collaboratively, and then helping kids that needed help and pushing kids that needed to be pushed. That work will continue this year, really focusing on student engagement, making sure hope is a big deal for our kids, right? Hope is one of their strategies. And then equity practices as well. Questions? Celebrations, smiles.
Good news.
Yeah.
Yep, very good
It
news.
is good news.
Trish, I don't think the board has actually been informed that we're switching to FastBridge yet. Could you share just a
Oh.
brief overview of what
Yeah,
that is
you
and what
bet.
that means?
You bet. We were pretty excited for multiple reasons. We have used the state mandates that we do in early literacy screener for pre-K through 2. We used PALS. That was the state assessment. That ban was lifted. We still have to do the screener, but we can use other things. We have to have a progress monitor for our RTI program to keep track of how our kids are doing. Are they making adequate progress? We use Ames Web for that. We use Performance Series, formerly MAPS, then Performance Series. It's a computer adaptive test I talked about, where kids take it and it keeps adjusting to their levels so that we can see exactly where they're performing and what we need to do. Multiple platforms, just like the state does to us. We have access testing, we have DLM, we have Word, right? In that. In walks Illuminate to talk to us about that data warehouse, and they said, "Oh, are you still using Performance Series? I want you to check this out." And so we checked out FAST original, now it's called FastBridge. It is from the University of Minnesota. It is a one-stop shop. They have got early literacy screeners that we could use for our youngins. It has got computer adaptive for reading and for math. It also has progress monitoring, CBMs, that we are used to. It's almost exactly the same as Ames Web. And on top of that, it has a social emotional, the Savers, which will help us when we want to use that with students to put our arms around some of that data. All of that for a price of this, $6 a kid. We were paying $11 for Performance Series, plus $7.50 for PALS, plus $6 for Ames Web. But I only got to give some money for computers.
Yeah.
So after evaluating the product and having some of our biggest researchers get in there and look at it, Cheryl had, we dig right down into the bottom of the research bin there, and looking at University of Minnesota and talking to Prescott, who already uses FAST. Their superintendent is from Minnesota, came across, brought FAST with him, and they're thrilled with the data. We then are making the switch. It has taken us a while to get Illuminate up and running and FAST up and running, kind of a pain in the neck, because we wanted the two to talk to each other. We wanted to have one system that we're just flowing through. We could have done two separate, moving a lot quicker, but we're gonna go slow to go fast. So, that one.
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Good work.
That was good, right? So we just today, I believe, have all systems go and we're ready to go, set up our assessment window for after Friday. Friday, teachers will be going in to make sure they're fully trained on how to administer the assessments as part of their professional development day. I'll also be sending you a note on the other activities going on Friday, including further science training and so on.
Thank you. Any other questions for Trish? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So next we're on item 7. So Mark, you have some information for us about policy review?
Yeah, what we'd like to do is, we met with our policy group that does our policies. And
Thank you.
we need to get rolling on these updates. And so what Paige and I were talking about the other day when what's his name, Neola was here, was putting aside a piece of time at every work session to review policy and try to put 3 to 5 in each cycle. So, you have a couple readings, so in a work session, we get 3 or 4 or 5 policies, depending on how heavy they were, out to the board, talk about them at a work session. That would be a first reading, and then the second reading would be, the end meeting. Then we start a new cycle, and hopefully in between there, we get the procedures done as we progress through. Because right now, we're hardly even hitting the review of the policies that we need to hit. So that's the strategy that I'd like to propose, that we section off just an automatic time at every work session for policies.
So would that include new suggested policies, review of all our old policies? I mean, I don't even know how many policies we have, and if we do 3 to 5 a month, would we get through all of them in 3 years, or?
Go ahead.
So there's, every 6 months, Neola will send a suggested set of updates based on either legislative action or the attorneys that they work with that are familiar with school districts within Wisconsin and the other areas that they serve. So they will send suggested updates. Most of them, from what Stu shared, districts want to act on. They may want to adjust a little bit of the wording. So those are, I don't know what you guys would want to do as far as suggestions to those, because they're kind of already, there's already suggestions from Neola based on their attorneys. And we have a lot of those to do.
Okay.
So I don't know from your guys' perspective what you would want as far as then the other policies that aren't included in those updates. Adding new policies or updating existing ones that aren't in this revision group from Neola itself.
Anything we want to revise, we can throw into the mix, and it'll just lighten up the Neola group as we go through.
So you were thinking 3 to 5
Well,
with the
depending what they
suggested
are.
updates every 6
Some
months?
would be pretty simple, like
Sure.
the work session, open forum, pretty simple,
Yep.
pretty straightforward. But there's gonna be some that are pretty heavy duty. So I guess we're just gonna take a look at them, see what the workload is. And how much discussion, because some of these may have some pretty in-depth discussion that'll take up quite a bit of time, so.
We just did it up at CISA too, and they took a section each month, and they would put it out there for us, so we read it ahead of time, and then came back with our questions or proposed changes. So the work wasn't necessarily done, the review of it was done right at the meeting, so.
This is a very long process to do this. I mean, this is not something that we're gonna get done in 6 months and forget it for a while. I mean, this is continual,
Yep.
and, we need to get going on it.
Do we have a policy at all that speaks to how often our policies will be reviewed?
I don't think we have a policy of that. Some policies are just, need to be, by nature of the policy,
Yep.
they have to be updated every year.
Yeah, I'm thinking 2 things. One is we have suggested updates that come in, that we need a process to regularly get those in front of the board. But we also have, I don't know how many policies that, is it something that they all should be reviewed every 5 years, or every 3 years, or once a year, or, what's the best practice for reviewing policies that there aren't any suggested updates to?
In my experience from it is when situations arise, and you take a look at your policy and you say, oh, hey, we haven't updated. I mean, obviously, there's some things that need to be,
Yeah.
that's a lot of times how policies get updated. But otherwise, taking Neola's lead on, what's happening in the legislature, and making those changes are really the immediate ones we need to deal with. So we're current with the law. So we'll get a system and a template on how we're gonna attack these. And, Rochelle and I walked down that path and then she left. I mean, and so it kind of took a hit on us here, so. Again, so that's okay, we're just gonna dedicate work session time, maybe 10, 15 minutes out of a work session. And, we'll send these out ahead of time so you can read them, and then that'll be the question and answer time during that work session time, so.
So does that sound good, that every work session will have some agenda time dedicated to policies?
Makes sense.
Alright. And then I know at one point in time we had logged into WASB and we're playing around with comments there. Is that the, or not, no, not
Board
WASB,
docs.
Board Docs?
Or board docs.
Yeah. Otherwise, I had requested that we review the, public participation policy. And so the other option would be that, Tasia would put that in a Google Doc and we could review it from there, and then she would go into the board docs to do updates.
Well, you can't do updates in the.
Or, no?
Well, the use of board docs for this is a nice idea, but I'd have to pull it up to link it to the agenda anyway,
Sure,
because I can't
link it separately.
link, you have to log in to see it.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be viewable to anyone but those of us with the login, so I'd have to be pulling it out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with pulling it out into a Google Doc and then doing a copy paste. I am more comfortable with Google Docs than I am with board docs. I'm willing to learn board docs. But I feel like if I have to pull it out anyway so that it's viewable to everyone on the agenda and that sort of thing, then we should just do the work there versus trying to log into board docs.
Well,
as a whole.
we're really at Neola's mercy though, as far as when it gets changed.
Right, so once it was approved here, then I would, whatever is finally decided, then I would copy and paste that back into board docs and submit it saying, ready for Neola to publish that way.
And you can subtly suggest that maybe you want to use Google Docs.
Well, I've been on a couple webinars this last week and they've said that they're wanting everyone to not use, or just to house it and that sort of thing that they, because,
Protects it for them.
yeah, they don't want it sent to them in a Google Doc, they want it sent to them through board docs. We can do it however we want on our end, but
Yep.
submission to them is all through board docs versus Word or Google Docs.
Do we have, the ability to affect what's published about our policies? For example, when you log into board docs, you can see when a policy was adopted, when it was updated, when it was revised, those details. On our public site, those details about a policy aren't visible. And so I don't know if there's a button we can check or something that we can ask them to publish that part.
What details?
When it was adopted, when it was last updated or revised. Basically whenever board action was taken on that policy, the history of it.
Yeah, usually that's at the bottom of it, so I'm surprised it's not on there.
It's not, it's,
Yeah.
it gives a state statute, but doesn't give our,
Yeah. When you sign
Approval.
into board docs, it's there. You can view it as a signed-in user, but it's not a part of what we, what's publicly visible to anyone who clicks on our link. And that's just one question I have about the program, because I would like to see that published if possible.
Isn't it imperative that it's published?
Even for me as a board member, I like to see what's the history of this policy. Is it something that,
when does it come in and when was it
Yeah.
updated, it does.
Especially with some of them, there's a list of changes.
Yeah.
well, yeah, and I don't wanna have to dig back through minutes to try and figure out when was the last time we reviewed this policy. I'd like to see it on the minutes, but, my apologies, that took us off in I digressed into a different.
What I was referring to is if it's on the public site, does it, would it rather, versus the documents that we're looking, so we see those updates.
As a parent, I guess that was informative to me too. You know, I mean, and I think it's an accountability piece as a taxpayer. Is our board keeping our policies? I don't know. I might be strange in that I look at that for other districts
Well,
every year, but.
There are people that love that policy piece to it, and that's what they look for. And if it just appears that they're not updated, you know, that's just reason to gossip, but it's like, you know, yeah,
Okay.
update.
So what I'm hearing is that we will have some time dedicated on our future work sessions to policies, that Tasia and Mark will pull out 3 to 5 of the most top need suggested updates for what we'll look at. And then for the public participation at board meetings, I'd love to take a few minutes and get the board's feedback on that. We had dabbled with, we've been including it on our work sessions the last few months. I'm not sure that our policy, if our policy dictates that or not. Our policy does limit people to 2 minutes. I've never been able to effectively limit someone to 2 minutes. So I'm wondering what the board feels about that limit. And if there, I guess, are any other updates that you would like to see to this policy and thus our practice.
I think I was one who requested it on the, to be on both, just because sometimes people can come this night, not maybe in 2 weeks, and when it's hot on their minds, they wanna get it off their chest. So I'd like to keep it on both.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of people that do it, so if we offer that opportunity every
Yep.
time, at least
How
that's
about on that
there.
first sentence of the policy, it says all regular and special meetings, if it said all regular, special, and work sessions, simple as
Yep.
that?
And I'm with you, I would have a hard time cutting somebody off. I appreciated how you were able to do that, Bob, very much. I know that it takes, you know, you need to be comfortable doing it, so.
Mhm.
Well, within 2 minutes, I feel you can get to your point.
Well,
Very
Kim didn't.
I understand that there's some avenues that are outside that, and it's hard to take discretion on
Yep.
what you allow to continue, what you don't. But then, if you move it to 5 minutes, then you're just sitting about here, I think,
Mhm.
I don't wanna make it unlimited.
Yeah.
Oh,
I like the 2-minute limit in
So
there.
Kim's
but it's-
interpretation was if no one else was there, she got the whole time.
Right, or if
Oh,
nobody's
sure.
out there, and if
Gotcha.
nobody's down.
That's what she did,
Yeah.
that's what she did, so I,
Ah.
yeah.
Having been a person who has prepared to speak in that 2 minutes, it is, you have to prepare a lot to thoughtfully make your point and have any data or evidence behind it, rather than just making a point and having it not have any opinion, or not just be seen as an opinion.
My point was, 5 minutes probably is
Oh.
appropriate,
Sure.
other than 2 minutes, because you gotta be so precise.
Gotcha.
So,
So would we be comfortable, Tasia, can you go into suggesting mode and type right on here? So if you could add, after special meetings and work sessions.
Our work sessions considered separate than a special meeting? I only ask that because I
That
never
would
see
be-
work sessions listed anywhere, and I'm,
Yeah, because
I
we
don't
didn't
know.
use to call it that, so it's not in the law, it's what we're choosing to call it. So for our
Okay.
work policy, I think we can stick it in there.
okay.
Where special sessions is in the other.
Thank you.
And then talk about number of minutes too, is that?
Yep, so if we could shift that to, is 5 what people are comfortable with, or 3
No,
or
I wanna
4?
keep it at 2, and it says it's up to your discretion to go up to 20 minutes. So if they wanna talk 3 or 5, fine, but let's start with 2.
the problem is being consistent,
Yeah,
because I did get called out on why I cut somebody off, and I let somebody go a little bit farther.
need a timer.
that helps.
Well, and I personally didn't feel comfortable cutting off Kim because she was talking
I
about the death of a
know,
person
I
and
know.
other things, and that was my first time, and I didn't do a good job of it.
No, I
Um,
think you did exactly what this thing allows you to do, I really do.
Well, but I kind of agree with some of the criticism that previous board chairs might receive, that it's important to be consistent. And, you know, just because one person is talking about a topic that might be perceived sensitively, they shouldn't be able to go on for 20 minutes, when
Doesn't
another
it-
person's only allowed 2.
Wouldn't it make a difference how many people wanted to speak?
Well, then you're getting outside of that. If you have two people debating on one topic and you allow somebody to go 2 minutes, and then you're like, oh, we have 20 minutes, so you can go on for.
No, I would keep it at the 2 then.
And everybody abides by the same parameters, and, you know, it's always helpful to have somewhat of a timer.
Mhm.
Hourglass does work really nice to flip it up, so there's a
Sure.
visual aid for someone to see.
Yeah.
That's what they use in
Okay, we can
many
go to 3
cases.
minutes then. Cause you can buy a 3-minute
I
timer.
would expect most people would probably wrap things up in 2 minutes. If we wanna put something in the details that you don't be repetitive, or you just kind of have some type of guidelines for at least keeping somebody on track, or somebody bringing.
So we do have that little statement that we read at the beginning. I guess what I was looking for is, like I interpret this as a person is only allowed to speak a maximum of 2 minutes per topic, and that altogether, all of the people who want to speak on any topics isn't to go over 20 minutes. Is that?
Unless you wanna let it go more
Sure.
at the
Yeah.
board president's discretion. So you can cut it off and say, we're done with,
Yeah.
we're done. If things start getting out of, you know, context, or if somebody's making attacks at somebody, well, this obviously is a witch hunt, so we're done with this public comment. I think you,
Yep.
as the board chair, have the discretion to shut that down or extend it,
Sure.
and what your feelings are. So if you think something's headed in an inappropriate direction,
Yeah.
I think that's why that's in there, so you can.
Sure. And I guess what I would like personally is an extension of that 2 minutes, maybe to 3 or to 5. And then I would feel confident, I would feel more comfortable with that limit for people, that they're having an opportunity to express their opinion and whatever informs that opinion. But then that we can consistently cut people off at that limit, and feel like we're giving everyone a consistent opportunity to be heard before the board. I guess even beyond the one situation that seemed to be very personal with a death experience. It seems like people are just getting to their point at 2 minutes, and then you're like, come on, wrap it up, so I can cut you off and feel like I'm being consistent.
I think it's important to help people be concise though. I do not want to go to 5 minutes. If 3 minutes is what you guys want, I'll go along with it, but I would prefer to keep it at 2. I think we need to help people be concise and speak their minds clearly and concisely.
I think 3 minutes is
I think maybe what we could do too, since we do make comparisons, is see is
Sure.
what other
Yeah.
districts,
Yeah.
municipalities, I think the norm is about 2 minutes,
Okay.
but,
Done.
and again, that maybe
Yeah.
is a.
I think it is a 2 to 3, because I know I've been to all the different school boards and flapped my yapper and never been cut off. They like to hear from me.
We used to allow 20 minutes, depending on how many people were speaking.
Sure.
And the chair made the decision.
To divvy it
You know,
up
I'd
based on
say
that.
there's 10 of you, each get 2 minutes, and if you're gonna say the same thing,
Okay.
you know,
Right,
don't
that's some,
I mean,
All right.
whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. So, we'll bring this forward on another agenda just to look at the change in verbiage with the adding work sessions. And we'll continue with that practice as we've been doing. And then, Mark, could you look into what other municipalities and schools do for their, and then based on that feedback, we'll either keep it at 2 or change it to 3. Sound good?
So do you want this on the regular session agenda as a, I didn't hear not until
I think we
the
should just
work
bring it back
session.
to the November work session, and then we'll go from there.
We'll
'Cause
check
it's
with-
not gonna
we'll
change
check with
practice, we'll
conference schools
continue
and
with-
See what conference schools are doing.
Perfect. All right, so then we have the facility analysis.
Okay, the facilities piece, now this is one of our results in the strategic plan. Attached there, you'll see a letter from Wold and Associates, and that's an architectural firm. If we're gonna move forward in the future with some facility improvements, this is something we need to do as a facility assessment. And the letter's pretty prescriptive there, what it is. You know, they come in with a team of engineers, and they'll tell us exactly what we have here. And there's really two parts to it. That's the part they charge for, because they spend a great deal of time on that, and every engineering firm or architecture firm does this. The other part is needs assessment, which is where they will meet with departments and board members and principals and see, okay, what do we feel we need to meet the needs of today and tomorrow's learners? The reason Wold is here, architectural services are like attorneys. You don't have to take lowest bid. They're professional services, so you can choose who you want to work with. I've worked with them forever. They've gotten districts I've worked in before out of a lot of trouble because they're good. They're probably the top firm in the Midwest. They're very good. Worked with them for a long time. We can go out to bid for this type of work. There's a lot of outfits that do that. My doctoral work was done on designing educational facilities, so I know a lot about this area and how these firms work. That's probably why I've stuck with Wold all these years, because I know their process is tried and true. The second part of that, where you talk about needs assessment and selling referendums and getting community committees and things like that, I don't rely on architects or on that part too much, because if we're going to sell something here, we need to sell it. You don't want to put a group out there that's going to benefit from the sale of you want them for reference, and what have you. But I just wanted to show you that's what we're looking at if we want to move ahead, because it's an important part. It's really the baseline for establishing what we have and what we're going to need, and to start getting these community groups together and start really building. Right now it's about a 2-year process to get through all of this to the point where we can say, you know what, let's go to the public. And then to do that, we have to have good data. So again, that's the price tag, and again, if you wanna go out for bid on it, we sure can. Personal recommendation, again, my experiences, I've worked with a lot of firms, but this is the one that I would go with in a heartbeat.
So my question is, do we, by policy, have to go to bid, or do we not? I
No,
don't know.
non-professional services, again, it's like selecting an attorney. We don't put legal services out to bid. Of course, you can look at rates and things like that,
Mhm.
Sure.
but you're free, you're free from the bid law and things like this. So if you want to think about that, and
So there was a
Okay.
company that did some type of a.
they've done work here in the district before.
So who was the company that supported the energy assessment and the,
Oh, that was,
They did a presentation
yeah, I know who it
for us.
is. God dang it. LHB, I think, was doing some energy work here. You remember Bob? I think it was LHB. I know too many people that work for these outfits, and I know things I shouldn't know about them.
Mhm.
because I would be curious what's in that compared to what we,
Well, the
Need to have
energy
done.
piece is gonna be different than
yeah.
this work here, because this is mostly structural.
But there was a lot of structural pieces in what they reported to us. There was a lot of your windows need to be
Well,
fixed
the
here and
HVAC
your-
and envelope and that, but, yeah, it's part of it. They're looking for cost savings, they're not looking for structural defects, and what it takes to, you know, take a look at the high school, you know, there's obviously some things that are needed over there, and, you know, there's some firms that have the wherewithal to handle the vision of those types of things.
So is it, so we would need to do 3 separate ones, if we wanted to do one that actually addressed the physical buildings, that's this one. Something else would be for energy efficiency and cost savings potentially, and then the third one would be, okay, what do I want to move forward with education? Do we need all 3?
No, but you, the energy piece, I think they've done some of that with LHB here. You know, they've done some bits and pieces. The one we're talking about here takes this whole complex, every building, does a very thorough analysis of it and says, and here's what you have, you know, as far as the present structures, the condition of them. The next piece, and that's what we're paying for, is that analysis there. The next component of it is where you get into a needs assessment, where we look at, let's just say we take a look around the conference and where we're at. You know, we got a track we can't use, we don't have an auditorium, we don't have a commons area, you know, there's things that we may want, and they'll work with all of our departments and our principals, and they'll sit down with us, okay, what do we wanna see? And then they'll put all that information together and say, well, you know, what direction you wanna go? Do you wanna go with additions on the buildings, or, you know what, maybe you need to go, maybe you're just better off building a new high school. I mean, they'll present options to the board, and then they'll help us coordinate the public outreach on it also, if we want them to, the surveying, because those are all steps in this process, but we need something to work from, and that's what the facility assessment really gives us. It'll tell us what we have here.
So Wool does that next step as
Wool
well,
does-
eventually?
Wool does all of them.
Okay.
They'll do all of them, but the only piece we're gonna get charged for is that facility assessment, as far as, you know, just what it is, because that's when they, again, they bring the engineers in and they go through every building, and, you know, you're gonna end up with a document like this here of every nook and cranny. And which really helps when, okay, why do you need a new facility, or why do you need to make improvements? Well, first of all, we got roofs that need this, or windows that need this, or what have you. That's one component of it. The big thing that I see here is updating to meet the needs. I mean, we're behind. I mean, you know, you've got a great building down there, but you've got high school and middle school that are in tough shape. And again, you know, you drive by this place, and great campus, looks great, but when you get into these buildings and you see just how we're using the building too, you know, today they're not building high schools with media centers. You just aren't doing that anymore, or they're very small. So the spaces are different. You look over here at the high school, and it takes up half the building. You know, you just don't have those spaces anymore. And it's not just that, it's, you know, your industrial tech area, it's your, you know, things are more integrated with technology rather than, you know, the dirty welding anymore. You just don't see too much of that. But again, every district's different. You know, you wanna see what we wanna protect and what we wanna move into the future on. You know, like the Fab Labs. You know, there's a school being built now without those as a base piece. Now it's an extra thing, so. And again, this is part of,
Would they be available to come?
Yeah.
to
Yep.
speak
I
to
can sure have them come, board meeting, and do a brief presentation and go a little deeper in it. But I want you to see this, just to kind of see where we're, you know, what the first step of this is.
One thing that was mentioned at the training that Marie and I went to was that fund balance can be used to pay for planning costs, for facilities assessments and long-range planning for facilities. And then those costs can be recovered in a referendum, in a successful referendum, which is something that I wasn't previously aware of.
Yeah, you can pay those back. You know, some of these things, you know, like this, and even when we talk about technology here a little bit later, you know, you might think, gee, we're putting 20 here, we're putting 10 here, we're doing this. well, we need to do some of these things to get us up into this century.
Mhm.
You know, so I mean, we're playing catch up a little bit, and you're doing it at a good time right now because, you know, you're not broke, but, you know,
Do we know when the last facilities assessment of this type was done?
I think it was done when you had your last referendum. I think I just took that catalog out of my,
When Carl Sanderson was here.
when was the last edition put on here?
4 years
I was older than that. Are those things still sitting on the table?
Time goes so fast.
No, this was.
This building?
Was it this building?
Or the high school
Put an
edition?
addition onto the
I think it
high
was the
school.
high school edition that was new.
And I can find
Yep.
that out. I can find.
Well, so my only curiosity is there usable data within that needs assessment to start this process? Or is that data truly so dated that we need to do a full
I think,
scope of assessment again?
I think Wold already has some of the building prints and things like that, because they have done work in the building. I think they did the middle school here, so they have some of the, but they need to put them all electronic. That's how they work now. Yeah. But I'll schedule, I'll have someone come to the next board meeting and watch.
So you think in the
walk through this.
October regular session?
Sure. Yeah, hopefully they'll be available, but I'm sure they'll make themselves. Yeah, they brought our $100 million referendum in at $8 million under budget. They're pretty good.
Awesome. Any other questions for Mark?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Marie and Bob, do you remember, haven't we done a lot of this work with Seymour Davis and Seymour?
I don't remember that.
They were, they're an architecture.
That was back, yeah, that was a long time ago.
Well, I thought we did quite a lot with them, many different projects over the years.
Yep, we did in the elementary, this school was done with them. And then, I don't remember the general contractor that, up in Rice Lake that they like to use, SDS. Was one, is that the one you're talking about?
Seymour Davis and Seymour.
SDS.
So are they the same kind of company as Wool?
I've never heard of them before.
Yeah.
They must be in a Wisconsin firm.
I think they are. Pretty heavy in the schools in the area. But yeah, that would be with Carl Sanderson, Welsh companies, Wool. So they're one of the big players. It's just a matter of, I would say, preference.
Well, we'll have to come in, see how, it's all about relationships in this area here with architects and that. Again, I've had this relationship for years, which I don't benefit from, but I benefit from the fact that I know what they've done for us in the past in our districts, and when some of the firms have dropped the ball on us, they've been able to step in and have the wherewithal to help things out. And, you know, if we haven't done anything on the facilities here in the last 5-10 years as far as studies, that, you know, these buildings aren't like a fine wine, they're not getting better with age. You know, quite the opposite.
How long have you been saving up that?
I mean, that's
time?
just, well, it's just a fact, you know, that they just aren't. And, you know, you know if you have a leak somewhere, things don't get better the more we wait and put things off, so. But I'll have somebody here at the next meeting and you can walk through exactly what the process is. But it is really step one of any type of referendum they're gonna do.
Okay.
Let's see.
Well, and also anytime of type of long-term maintenance plan also. I guess I wanna make sure that this,
Yeah, and I think that's
Audit
what they
will
were
be
doing with
useful, whether or
LHP,
not
some
we
type
go
of
to
maintenance
referendum.
plan. I'll find out. Dave would know, but obviously wouldn't.
all right, any other questions on the facility analysis from Mark? All right, we're on to updates on board member requested topics.
Okay, I'm gonna go through these fairly quickly, a whole list here, and half the people aren't here that had questions
So I've been
on
keeping
these
a
things.
list of what each board member's requested and
Yeah.
our once around the table and
Sure.
different board
So,
meetings.
again, I'm just gonna go through fairly quickly on these. I did email you a note from Trevor on, I didn't put it on the agenda, I put an email to you about an update on the OCR complaint and about the Hudson land deal, the Hudson land piece. They're finishing up their final arguments for that lawsuit, basically. And I think that has to be presented in the next couple of weeks. And we've got, we've got some significant good data to combat what they based their decision off of from this other family that was there at the time and the things that they presented. We had 2 civil rights issues here. We had an ACLU complaint this summer that dealt around middle school issues, and that's been worked out, and a plan has been agreed upon between the family and the district there as far as how we handle issues. The other complaint is more high school related. That's through the OCR, and they're just finishing up the questions they had for us. All the data we had to provide. Doesn't look like there's any, this is from our attorney, that there's any, that we're guilty of anything. So now I'm going through the process of them presenting the information to the OCR and just seeing where they're at. This could take 6, 7, 8 months. And it's really not a lawsuit or anything, it's just complaint's been filed, okay, how do we defend ourselves against or the information that they're requesting? And they'll examine that and they'll get back to us, so there's nothing pressing with that as of right now, because we've been able to provide all the information that they've been asking of us. So that's the ALCU and the OCR issue, and again, there's an email to you on that from Trevor. I asked him for a little update on that. Did you want to talk about that legal counsel piece, or is that a?
Yeah, Marie, you had requested that we review policy 172 about legal counsel. Is that something you'd like us to put on for a future agenda, or?
I think that question was actually answered for me right away by Trevor.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy, the IT agreement, was that the lease agreement? What was it?
So we've had these HP boxes and what's the name of the virtual software that I can? VMware, for a few years now, and it's costly, and they're finding that they can do most of what they would like to with a Chromebox, and that you can also access VMware for users who need to with a Chromebox, but we didn't replace the HP boxes in the labs because they were on a lease. And so they were waiting
Okay,
to,
because I didn't have any information on that, so
Yeah.
I'll have to find that out.
so I was wondering where we were in that lease and what the plan is
Okay.
moving forward, and how we're monitoring the use of the VMware licenses, and if that's an opportunity for some cost
Okay,
savings.
that's a whole different thing than I thought, so I'll get information on that. For some reason, I thought it was containing this here piece, and then I look at it again, it's not lease agreement. Okay, so, I'll get the information. Public participation took care of. Update on the school boundary piece, as I just said, we're just filing our final briefs on that. And they did have a conversation with the judge in this matter and how they're gonna proceed. And they're gonna proceed basically in the least expensive way to do this. And then, so it's not gonna be, we're not gonna go out and sit in court, we're gonna be submitting information back and forth on that. And that's not a quick process either, so. Let's see. Date. What was number 7? Do you have that sheet for you?
Yeah. So there was a facilities update that Bob
Yep, and the
requested
next
on
one.
August. Updating the dress code language.
Oh,
for
yeah,
equitable.
okay. Help if I could read my writing here. And that was Katie had that issue and what that was agreed to for next year's piece to amend some of the different verbiage in there as far as how we related to dress. Number 8, there was a question about the effectiveness of the crisis plan and kind of looking at how we used it this last time with Bailey's, the tragedy there. And as any, all these things are so subjective that the crisis plan is used as a guideline. There's not a hard and fast for every situation, but, it's a good, solid plan. And, this one here, went right by the numbers as far as, how they assembled their team, appointed a person to be the family contact, and coordinated all the communication. And, we've had, at least at our table, a couple discussions of reviewing, that's, you always wanna do an end synopsis, so to speak, and, on how the process went. And that they've held theirs over with the counselors over there, to see if there's any suggested changes to policies and procedures. We've talked about it at the administrative table, and there isn't anything glaring here that says, oh, we should have done this. I've talked to the parents during this, and they can't say enough as far as, thank you. And that's what position we want to be in, we will offer as much as we can, as far as support, and also to our staff too. And that's the important piece there, is to keep these conversations up with our teachers and to the counselors that work with these situations, because these are 24/7 situations for us, where many people, they come to work and, it's a tragedy, but then they go on. So I'm happy with I shouldn't say happy, I'm pleased that the system worked in this, for this situation, but remembering that every situation is different. So when we do see holes in the system, we're gonna change them.
Was that crisis plan put into effect when they had that parental suicide?
No, there was, we got a hold of the mother, and they really played, father wasn't in the picture, wasn't around here, it was somewhat of an issue internally, but what hurricane is this one?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't, it was a different scenario.
Okay.
And that was communicated with the mother,
Yeah.
Anchor there, so. But again, that's where, every situation's different. And that, but, through this process, we had a lot of discussion internally about, things like memorials and procedures on how we conduct ourselves internally and what have you. And, we had some strong conversations at our cabinet table because of some things that had happened in different buildings that, no, this is what we're gonna do and what have you. So it's still trying to get everyone singing from the same songbook.
Mhm.
So with that, I'm pleased with how it played out in that situation. The one right now, and I think you're getting some notes out of this flyer deal, the handouts at the elementary school. I was kind of hoping Chris would still be here for this, but we don't have a policy on flyers. But this is it's a big piece. Last district, we had Halton Federal Court on this one. You've got 3 types of forums when you deal with outside groups. You've got an open forum, you've got a limited, and then you've got a closed. And I think what we've had here, I'm assuming, we had an open forum. Anybody wants to bring a flyer in and, hand it out to the kids, so be it. When you do that, you can't turn anyone away. So if the white supremacist or a church comes in or what have you, and this is what happened to us over in Elk River, is we had a church that wanted access to the kids. They wanted to hand out different things and what have you, because, hey, the Boy Scouts get to do this, and well, they're patriotic organizations, and if you go to a limited forum, you have to include them. There's a long list of patriotic organizations that have access to kids by federal law. Well, they said, well, they're a patriotic organization, well, they're just a church. And we ended up going all the way to federal court, we got beat. So we decided, you know what, we're going to a closed forum, nobody hands out anything. And that was tough for a bit, and that's a different area over there. I'm not suggesting that here, because when we started looking at, you know, our Bridging Somerset group and just our strategic plan, we're trying to build a community and build communications. And, you know, they're still allowing the communication. Now, we had, I think the ice skaters were upset. I got an hour of Dave Brock on me today because of the Halloween thing, that our attendance is down because we can't hand the kids a piece of paper. Well, we're still putting things out electronically to parents, which some parents love. They don't want that kid coming home with a piece of paper saying, look, I wanna go to this, and then it forces their hand to have to take them. But when they have that piece of paper there, it does improve, you know, participation. So, and again, one of our goals is to be that communication component for the community. You know, so really, you know, if the youth football, wrestling, hockey, what have you, wants to get something in our kids' hands to participate, I'm all there because of the community we have. I mean, if we start blocking people out, you know, what's gonna happen? You know, we're not gonna get the participation. But that's the decision you guys get to make, you know, so we've got 3 ways to go. With a limited, you can select, you know, if we say we have a limited forum, you can choose the groups, but you've known that if some group comes in and says, you know what, hey, I wanna access these kids, probably gonna have to do it. And if it's closed, that means we don't do anything, which I don't know if we wanna go there.
I don't think we do. I think Kathy made some very valid points, and Dave brought it up as well on a second situation. They've done it long enough where they've found what has been most successful in reaching the greatest number. And unfortunately for us, that is not electronically necessarily the best.
How has it been sent out electronically?
Well, it does, you know, it costs a little staff time over the
I was
elementary.
gonna say,
You know, and that's that's part of the piece why.
But you can change it, but to do it now, I don't think is in the best
Well,
interest.
it was just they decided not to do that by themselves. That didn't come here.
Yeah, I didn't
And
know
that's
that.
part of an issue of, you know, have also is that we gotta look at this as a big picture piece here with communication. You know, if you're gonna be looking at a referendum, if you're gonna be looking at some of these things, you know, you better be seen as being user-friendly and going that extra distance. You know, it's not the time to ruffle feathers and that, and
So
again.
what was the reason that they stopped?
Well, they can list a number of things. Well, it took too much staff time to do this and that, what have you. It doesn't have to cost us really anything, because if we don't hand them out, you provide them. But see, groups are coming and say, hey, we make copies of this and hand them. You know, so we have to put some procedures with this if we want to do it.
and it does cost staff time.
You know, there's no question about that. But then again, what's the downside of not doing some of these things? You know, there's a downside of just shutting our doors.
Yeah, if our goal is to develop as a community center, we need to afford the staff to do that. and
Well,
help with that.
And the other thing is we also have to look at efficiencies also. I mean, if it's far more convenient for me, the person with the piece of paper, to bring one piece of paper and say, make copies and hand it out to 700 kids, than it is for me to send a digital copy and email it to the person and say, can you send this out? That's totally passing the buck from the organizations. That's also kind of taking advantage
You know,
too.
it could be something as simple as putting a table out in the lobby out there. You want something out of it? Put it on the table. It's approved to be on the table, and kids walk by and they want to take one.
But they aren't gonna pick it up.
Well,
So regardless, we need policy.
Yeah,
And I think it's good to look at how other districts are handling this situation. A perspective that I got from a parent who moved from Minnesota to over here was, how do you handle all the paper that comes home? I'm used to getting one email once a week with all the links to the community ed classes and all the links to the community organizations and, you know, managing our family life that way. And as a parent, she was having a hard time managing all the paper that comes home from our district.
That's been the story for many years, but I don't think the right idea is to cut cold turkey.
Well,
I don't
We're doing-
disagree, but
parents today really don't want paper.
Yeah.
They want it
Yeah, I would be the
electronically.
first one, but because we did not give the option, and we're trying to reach everyone, we say it with our education, we're trying to teach all kids in the ways they will learn. Well, if we're trying to communicate with the majority, we need to
But then
do
we
it.
also have to communicate with the people who are
Yes.
supplying the papers, going,
Yes,
this is
I
what
agree.
parents want.
Yeah.
It might be convenient for you to have the school copy papers, but the parents that you're trying to get this information to are probably not even looking at the papers. So we have to figure out a way to do it in a way that works with today's parents and how they operate. Not, we've always done it this way, we've always been able to give out paper. You know, that's not necessarily, I mean, my kids all have kids, they don't want paper. They're like, you guys waste so much money, what's wrong with you? And they have kids in the school district, so I mean, the parents are paying attention to that. And if the people who, civic organizations that are trying to get this information out aren't keeping up with what our parents want, it's not the parents' fault, it's the civic organizations have to bridge that gap too.
Well, again, it's funny because having lunch with Dave today, and the four of us were all about the same age there, but a few of us use technology a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, and just gave him a wrath of grief because, come on, what year is it today? You know,
Mhm.
and his only response, I want it like it was the way it used to be. And Dave, it's probably not gonna be that way, but I'll see what I can do here, but let me throw a little work on this as far as, we just don't wanna get the impression that we're
Yeah.
trying to wipe out organizations here, and if we can find a way to help them communicate,
We just have somebody outside of the district administer the events and activities that are not school sponsored. And then send out, if there's an update to it, so parents don't have to constantly look.
Well-
See if they're gonna miss learn to skate or Boy Scouts and then they can administer it and here
I'd like
you
to
are.
see this all go through.
I was gonna say, that's what a good
community.
community
Mhm.
calendar
Yeah,
looks like.
that's, and a separate site where you go and see
Mhm.
everything that's going on, and we can promote it, but that's part of that communication plan is I gotta get my hand around this year as far as the next time we meet with this Bridging Somerset group is how do we want this to look, and how we're gonna deploy it, so. But I was just really curious if you had any dire set things that, we're not gonna, so you're open to.
Well, I think consistency in how the organizations are, what options are being given, and communication to our families as if we do make a change in our communication plan.
Well, I got a book from, I think all of us do, from the Richmond
Oh,
Community
yeah.
Education.
Mhm.
And I don't know who
Cheryl Emerson.
is behind that.
Mhm.
I don't know who that is, so.
But you don't, that's
I don't know who that is.
Kelly Emerson's mother-in-law.
Is it through the school district, is it through?
Yeah, community ed is usually through the school district as a branch of that, and I've got probably 4 or 5 different area catalogs they send them. Renee and I just met today on how this is gonna lay out and play out, and her first thing is to get a community advisory committee together, that's the first thing to start, okay, what do we want community ed to be, what have you, and she's already got like 15 people that wanna hold classes and that, so, yeah, it's gonna happen, it's just, we just need to do it right and well, so we don't have to keep backing up. And that, but as I told her today, to have community ed coordinate those efforts, so there's just, people know.
That's
And it's just like summer school, I want summer school going through community ed and online.
Yeah.
So then, could any of these groups and flyers
Oh,
use that
definitely,
as?
yep,
that
yep.
makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of this, like Dave's saying, goes through chamber, it's all, a lot of chamber stuff.
Mhm.
Chamber stuff, and that, which is fine, I mean, we're a small community, we gotta work together, on this to get the word out, and we want participation, so.
Mhm. Does, I know WASB had sent out one of their mailings that suggested that school boards review their policy on community communications. I'm assuming they also have a suggested policy
WASB
for Neola.
on community communications.
Yep.
I've never looked.
Yeah, one of those little tan booklets that we get in the mail. This past year was about that. So what direction would we like to give Mark for next steps? Anything? Or
Well, I don't know
wanna see
how
it?
fast the community ed can, but I think that might be the solution personally.
It's gonna take a while, but, you know, because the first goal is to establish themselves as an entity and then get these classes going, and we're hoping for this winter to, you know, get these on and on.
And then I think it's good to have that feedback, so we understand that information's not being handed out, that we're gonna get some flack on it. But just to have the board be informed that, okay, we're gonna change something, this is why we're changing it. Because we do have some angry individuals over, this. And
Well, it's on our agenda.
I actually thought it was a policy that we had.
No, it's
So,
not. It's
because
not.
we
It
had
was-
that discussion about your experience with it, so.
It's not a policy, it was just a decision made, a building level decision that, you know, really needs to be a district level decision. And it's on our agenda tomorrow, so I'll,
So as a board, would we like to review if Neola has a suggested policy, just to see what they,
procedure.
That'd be helpful for
Yeah.
the community ed stuff.
well, and even long-term to guide what
Sure.
community ed does.
No, right.
That's all I got.
Alright.
Good.
Well. So number 10 on our agenda is update from Marie and I on the WASB Data Dive workshop that we attended on Friday. So Marie, do you wanna share?
Well, I kind of did when Dave did
Yeah.
his. Actually, I was looking for that Neola email where we got our little passwords, so to see if I can look up that policy. You know, the biggest thing that I took home from that workshop was the respect level to recognize that when we ask for something, it really should have a reason as to why we're asking for it and how it will help us move towards our goal. And then to respect the time, their time restraints or their time demands on them. It gave a lot of very helpful links. And I do hope we can put together a calendar for you to have, that would be to share with them, so they know when these reports, and we know when we're gonna get them, so we can actually base or find support for what we're putting money towards within those reports. I really hope we can make that connection. There's a lot of little details, so if you guys want the electronic copies, I'll send them over. That really were references to websites as to that's where you pull that data from.
Sure,
So-
that'd be great.
And I see one of them responded.
Roger.
I haven't heard from
Or
Al,
Roger.
but Al said he's 60, and he said, and so you're not gonna hear from me in 24 minutes or 24 seconds. It may be 24 or 48 hours. So,
Why?
he just isn't comfortable with technology. He said, same conversation as what you had earlier with Dave.
He said he was 60.
Well,
I think they shared some definitions of accountability that I think would be useful for our board and potentially our administrative team to have a conversation about. So we're talking about the same thing, because I think we all potentially define it a little bit differently. They also talked about how, as board members, we are not only responsible for our individual actions, but publicly we have to take responsibility for the actions of all the individuals in our system. And they talked about how a Board of Education has to hold themselves accountable in a very public way to build trust with your community. They also talked about how perceptual data has to be addressed. You know, irregardless of if you do a survey, irregardless of if you believe it's accurate or not, for your community, that perception is their reality, so it has to be addressed. And then a lot of it was about developing a continual monitoring system. So they talked about identifying 10 benchmark districts as Marie said, from districts that are similar demographic, but are higher achieving, something that you want to aim towards. Also, something that would be Wisconsin National, maybe even international. And then they said to include your neighboring districts and any districts that you lose students to an open enrollment within those 10. And then you consistently, whether it's academic achievement scores, or budget comparisons, or facility comparisons, or socioeconomic status comparisons, or whatever, you use those 10 benchmarks districts continuously in your reports and assessments. And then they basically talked about developing a schedule that there would be about 10 reports per year, and knowing who's responsible for it and what data you'd like to see in that report, and then having those same reports every year annually, so that as a community and as a board, we're consistently looking at our academic achievement every October compared to the same 10 benchmark districts to gauge our growth and determine our next steps. And every maybe it's April, you're looking at your special education programs, looking at the same data benchmarked against the same districts. But they also said that it takes years to develop a system like that. They pointed out Chippewa Falls as a example district. And Al's been working with Chippewa Falls to create that system. So, I mean,
He
that might be
suggested looking at their website
yeah.
to see what reports they actually have.
In the afternoon, Guy Roger really talked about basically thinking about who else knows. And that there's so much data out there already, and that we've got great capable employees who are using that data every day. And so how can we ensure that other people know, that the board knows, that the public knows? Like they talked about, you have to do some asbestos report every year. Publish it. Inform the board and publish it so that your community knows that you're ensuring safe schools. So it was kind of that successful communication and regular communication, scheduled communication, builds that community relationships and community trust. And I think you said that the ultimate, when you know that you've got a great accountability and communication system going when your community says it's time to invest in technology in our districts, or it's time to add on an auditorium, or it's time to that your community is suggesting that, bringing that forward to your board. So
They both emphasize the importance of relationships and building that community involvement. Along the accountability side, the angle I heard it from was we want to know it so that we're better able to answer the questions as to why we did what we did. And so that's the accountability angle I think I would want to take too, because he also emphasized, and this was Al, we want to be knowledgeable, but not intimately. So we need to allow you to do your job. We don't need every little detail, but we want enough information so that we can justify why we decided to support it. So,
That's why, as Dave was talking, a lot of conversations with Dave, telling him that, in a real solid governance model, as board members, you guys approve the budget, that's one of your biggest things. You gotta know what's in it. And, granted, there's thousands of lines of detailed code you can go through, but you gotta make sense of it so you understand it. That's the process that we need to get in here, so when you approve that budget, it's good to go, it's mine. The only thing I need to come back for is say, okay, we need to do this, or there's a change to it. Otherwise, if it's within the budget, you already approve it, you know what it is, and we don't have to go through 3 months on a row, well, why are we doing this? No, I mean, it's good business. And then plus you know what's there, and you can defend that out in public.
yeah, if it supports our strategic plan, and that's the correlation we should aim for, that we can always make.
Yeah, and that should drive, that's why the plan should drive, the vast majority of that discretionary spending, which is only about maybe 20% of our budget, if that, probably 15%.
I do think we need a monitoring system beyond our strategic plan though. That's just
Yeah.
monitoring the overall sustainability sustainability and health of our system. You know, our strategic plan is our focused growth for the next 5 years, but there's a lot of other things that happen on a daily basis in our system that we still need to be continually monitoring and successful.
But I didn't see it as daily things being hours to monitor. I saw reports as being, and they do give this sample outline in it, so you'll get that when, this one was actually from Roger, so you might get this one right away. So that page in particular you might find interesting.
Yeah.
Because and with the monitoring, he suggested, you know, you've got 12 months of meetings. We have 2 a month, but he was saying, so find 10 reports that you really feel support why you're choosing to budget the way you're budgeting, and set those on a regular schedule. Make sense? And we've had reports over the years. The part that we've fallen short on is making that correlation and doing them so we can see from one year to the next, to the next.
And we've never had benchmark districts.
Right. We've had them, so I wouldn't say never, but we haven't used the same ones consistently because our conference changed for one thing. Well, not just once either. And I think, you know, now with a state report card, that's relatively new. So for us to be able to look at that each year is good. And the data has been there, but we haven't pulled it out to really look at it and see what is it actually telling me? How will that impact what decisions we make?
I think everything's driven by data now. I mean, everything is, and it's up to us to look at that data and ask questions if we don't understand it. And what does it mean? So,
One, I think if we collaboratively build the, reports that we're looking for, it will actually allow our board to function at the higher level that we would like to. Because they were talking about looking at financial solvency, long-run solvency, service level solvency, cash solvency, that are really high level, how your system is functioning. And, that's broader, deeper conversations than I've experienced since I've been on the board. And if we're looking at policy in those pieces, we won't be getting tied up in the day-to-day details. We'll be looking at the cost of post-employment benefits.
yeah.
And things like that affect the long-term sustainability of our district.
I feel fortunate that we have had a business manager for a number of years. We had Bob before Dave, and both of them have done a really good job of giving us the full budget picture. So our solvency is good. We would be in sorry straits if it was not. And I feel bad for boards that find out the hard way that they aren't. That's awful. But OPEB was hard for every school district. So that was something that should have been addressed many years before it was actually addressed.
Times change.
Yeah, and demands.
Say, I missed one thing, and that's why I had that technology, I had something
Oh.
else in there. The boardroom technology, we
Oh,
got
yeah.
bids on, new electronics in
Oh,
here
that's right.
as far as,
That's right.
to have streaming and recording capabilities, and we got 2 bids, both were good bids from, Tierney and, CDW, but they're roughly around $10,000 to, CDW is about 8,100, but, that doesn't include installation. Tierney, very reputable, they've done, CDW bought our Chromebooks through, Tierney does a lot of our other technology, and they're 10,000, and that includes everything, they come in, set up. It's basically one camera which catches our whole board and presentation area. And then there'll be a control here for different settings, where do you want to focus on in that. But just want to bring that back if that's something you want to pursue. And, again, it's part of the communications piece under strategic plan. Again, that's why things like this, the plan should drive a lot of our budgeting pieces. I can talk to Dave a little bit, we had some savings and some energy stuff last year where there's, some savings that we could possibly apply to something like that if you're interested in upgrading, which would give a very professional, it's one of these things that we probably want to do that don't do this right now, so.
found what the amount is for Aviance? What they owe us?
Yeah, you know, that's, it's about 30,000 a year, and they're looking at about 300,000, but.
What?
Over 10 years. But there's, this is gonna get sticky. There's, yeah, yeah.
How'd that happen?
We're waiting for the next move. Well, it had to do with reimbursables, what they, said they didn't, they decided to reimburse us this last year because, and I can't remember what exactly the situation was, for, I'm gonna need Dave for the details,
Yeah.
but again, we just had a big discussion on this the other day, that it was, they decided to reimburse us for last year, and then Dave got to go, well, if you made this mistake last year, you're making the same mistake for 10 years. And, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't have reimbursed you that, you know, so we're getting some, we're waiting to see what they're gonna come back to us with, as far as, some type of piece here. And then we'll decide what our action will be. But it could be, you know, it could be up to a $300,000 pill that they have to swallow, so.
All right. So I think we're going
We're
to
getting
skip
30
over
of them.
item number 11, just looking at the current time. So item number 12 is once we're on the table. So are there any questions or requests if we do once we're on the table? Marie?
I had one, but I can't think what it is now.
Okay.
Can you email it to me?
Bob, what do you think? Patty, anything in addition to Aviance?
I'm still trying to choke that one down.
Yeah, I thought it was 30,000 altogether,
Yeah.
that's it, but that's over 10, that's every year for 10 years, so.
Did you guys all get an email from WASB about a research survey? No? So they're conducting a research about the effectiveness of school boards connected to academic achievement. And so they're inviting board members to complete the survey. All of our responses would be maintained to be confidential. But I always think it's good to contribute to large-scale research projects like that if we can, so.
Where did it come from?
It came from WASB. It was just today, the subject of it was research survey, and it came from messages at App Production. It's signed by John Ashley, the executive director. So I can, if you'd like, I can forward it.
That would be great.
I think everybody probably got it.
I didn't get it.
Just before, it just came like 2 o'clock.
No, I didn't get it.
You did not? Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
I'm looking at it right now.
I tell you, because it would shorten the conversation up.
I'm serious. Do you suppose it happened because you registered up to us on that thing and that's why they got us on their email list?
No, I got them before that.
Yeah, I did
Yeah,
too.
because everyone is registered in there. I have to go in and update every year who's
I wonder why
board members and
I
everyone's in
get
there.
emails from all kinds of other students. But I can't see that you'd like to get out of.
All right, so we are on to item 13, topics for action. We have an action item to resume Robert's Rules of Order. Is anyone willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Patty. Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. All those in favor of resuming Robert's Rules of Order, please say aye. All those against? Motion passes unanimously, 4-0. Our next item is to adjourn into closed session. The recommendation is that the school board adjourn in a closed session where the board will consider the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of a staff member pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.85, section 1, section C. Is anyone willing to make that motion?
Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Patty. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes unanimously 4-0. Then we also have an action item to continue the closed session to consider the performance evaluation of the district administrator pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, section 1, section C. Is anyone willing to make that motion?
Question on this, being that there's 4 of us, I don't know what the discussion is going to be.
Um,
Postpone this conversation, or is it?
No, I think we can
for
move.
us? Okay.
I mean, move forward. I did send you an email.
I don't know, that's good.
Well, I think it'll be enough
In the
to-
items that we have to this part, so board members.
yeah.
That's it.
I'm sorry, I stepped out.
Well, I don't think either would be 100% completed no matter what, and I think it'll at least give Mark some feedback to be able to move forward. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Yeah? So are you willing to make that motion?
Sure.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Marie. All those in favor of continuing the closed session to consider the performance evaluation of the district administrator, please say aye.
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 All those against? Motion passes unanimously 4-0. So let's take a 3-minute stretch, bathroom break, water, and come back in the closed session.